Okay, we're doing something unorthodox from a Rambam perspective, which is we're not starting with the Hakdama. Okay, so there's a very long and very important introduction, and if we were fully committed to learning a Rambam every week, I would say we should do the Rambam's introduction. But since we're just doing this as a pilot shiur, and we're testing the waters, for today we'll get into the meat and potatoes of a Rambam, and then maybe we'll backtrack and revisit the introduction if we get deeper into the topic. So you'll see on the title page, the Rambam for every book has a pasuk. People don't necessarily pay much attention to that, but he has a pasuk for the book itself. Az lo evosh be'abiti al kol mitzvotecha, which he likes Tehillim Kuf Yud Tet actually. But that doesn't appear, that pasuk doesn't appear on this sheet. But in the beginning of the book, in the beginning of the introduction, he has Az lo evosh be'abiti al kol mitzvotecha, which is in the Rambam. If you had the whole thing in front of you, you would see it in the introduction. But here he just has the pasuk that is the pasuk for Sefer HaMadda, the book of knowledge, which is on this side. It looks like this. So it says, Mishoch chastecha liyodecha v'tzidkatecha liyishrei lev, which means extend your kindness to those who know you, and your justice or your tzedakah to those who are straight of heart. So the Rambam is telling us there are two different categories of people from the beginning, right? There are people called Yodecha, people called those who know you, and people who are called Yishrei Lev, straight of heart. And this is a very key distinction or a very key concept in the Rambam, because he differentiates. People call the Rambam an elitist. Okay, he believes that certain people are superior to other people, but he's not really an elitist because he believes you have to earn it, right? And if you have to earn it, if it's a merit system, it's not really being elitist. If I say that somebody who graduated from Harvard is more qualified than somebody who graduated from an online institution, then it's not really being elitist. It's just being honest. Somebody who had a better education, they're at a higher level, they're more qualified, and I give their word, more significance, more weight. Okay, so the person who's Yodecha, somebody who knows Hashem, what Rambam means by knows Hashem, the reason why he's quoting this pasuk is because it's called Sefer HaMadda, the book of knowledge. What kind of knowledge can you have? You can have theoretical knowledge. You can have knowledge about these esoteric topics, like you mentioned. Esoteric topics of the ways of Hashem and the Malachim, angels, things that we consider the secrets of the Torah, the depth of the Torah. That's the type of knowledge that Rambam would say is the highest level of knowledge. That's really when it says Yodea Hashem, somebody who knows Hashem. That's what it means. Okay? Somebody who's Yishrei Lev is somebody who knows the right ethical behaviors. In other words, knows the mitzvot, knows how to behave in a way that is appropriate in the eyes of Hashem. Not necessarily does he know all the sodot. He doesn't necessarily know the depth of it. He doesn't necessarily know the esoteric, what's behind it. What we might call, today they would call that the Kabbalah. But the Rambam doesn't talk about Kabbalah. He doesn't necessarily subscribe to that school of thought of the Kabbalah. It doesn't matter whether you believe in Kabbalah or not. The idea that the ultimate area of knowledge is the esoteric area, everybody agrees with that there is a depth behind the scenes, behind the veil of the Torah is a whole world of sod, of secret knowledge. So the Rambam is going to be introducing us in Sefer HaMadda to two types of knowledge, two types of understanding. One is going to be a type of understanding that we might call metaphysical understanding or theoretical understanding, and the other type of knowledge is going to be the knowledge of where do we fit in. In other words, what kind of behavior or what kind of objectives should we have in our growth as human beings as part of Hashem's bigger system, as part of Hashem's creation. So the Yishrei Lev are the people who have their straight of heart. They're people who have their behavior and their character and their priorities are in the right direction. The Yodecha is the highest level. Someone who has Yosher Lev, somebody who has straight heart, somebody who is properly developed as a person, is somebody who can advance to the next level of being Yodecha. And you see that he also distinguishes between two types of providence, and this is famous. The Rambam's view about this is famous, right? Mishoch chastecha liyodecha. Now, obviously, the Rambam did not write this pasuk, but he quotes the pasuk from Tehillim that he thinks captures his vision of the world. Okay, best. Mishoch chastecha. What's chastecha? Kindness, right? Kindness is special consideration. Okay, if you go to the DMV, they don't have any kindness. It's all red tape, right? There's no, they don't let you skip the line, right? You have to sit there all day long until they're ready to take you. There's no chastecha. It's only tzidkatcha. It's only a set of procedures that they have that they follow. Okay, so chastecha means individual attention. Chesed is something that you're not following the rules. When you want kindness, it means you want somebody to deviate from the usual procedure. Have mercy on me. If you follow the usual procedure, I'm going to be in too much trouble. So look at my situation. I need chesed. Okay? So the person who is yodecha, somebody who knows Hashem at the highest level, is worthy of very special divine intervention in their life, even beyond what the ordinary person deserves. And the Rambam is big on this idea, but many people think that's just a Rambam idea, but it's not. The Ramban also says the same thing in a couple of places. In his commentary on Sefer Yov, he says it. I mean, most of the Rishonim and the Geonim subscribe to this idea. And it makes sense because you see it throughout Tanakh that the greater people, the greater tzaddikim, have Hashem's intervention in their life to a greater extent. Hashem is more involved. You could put it this way. The way I like to think of it is this. The more your life is involved with Hashem, the more Hashem is involved with you. So for somebody who their entire being, every fiber, every thought, every action, every choice they make revolves around HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for that person, Hashem is much more focused on them, so to speak. In other words, it's a two-way street. So for the Yodecha, there's Chesed. For the person who knows Hashem, there is Chesed. There is a very special track that they're on, very special intervention and concern from Hashem. V'tzidkatecha liyishrei lev. For the person who is Yishrei Lev, who follows the mitzvot, he's not necessarily somebody who's broken through to the next level of Yediat Hashem. He hasn't necessarily gotten there yet. So that person has tzedakah. He has a certain, but it's tzedek, it's righteousness. Hashem deals with him fairly, and He deals with him according to a system. It doesn't necessarily mean that he isn't given special consideration, but he's given special consideration as part of, let's say, Am Yisrael. The Jewish people, as a collective, have their own providential relationship with Hashem. It's not me as an individual, it's me because I follow the program of Bnei Yisrael. The Jewish people have, so there's three levels. There's for the whole world. There's hashgacha for the whole world, which is the most general. We could even call that the laws of nature or something really broad. Then there's hashgacha for the Jewish people. We have a covenant with Hashem. We have a brit with Hashem. And there are certain, that follows certain rules and regulations that Hashem put in, enforces in terms of how He relates to the Jewish people. It gets renewed every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, etc., etc. And then there's individual providence. Individual providence is for the person who doesn't just follow the program, but actually goes beyond that to a level of knowledge of Hashem that penetrates to a whole different dimension. So that person stands out. What does Hashem say to Moshe Rabbeinu? Yidaticha v'shem. I know you by name. Does that mean He doesn't know you by name? He doesn't know your name? Of course, Hashem knows everything. What does Yidaticha v'shem mean? It means that Moshe Rabbeinu stands out from all other people, from all other Jews, even having a special relationship with Hashem and a special level of providence that nobody else has. That's Yidaticha v'shem. And so a person who's on that level, that they have a special knowledge of Hashem, Hashem has a special level of involvement and engagement with them. So that's what the Rambam is introducing Sefer HaMadda with, this concept, that ultimately our relationship with Hashem can traverse two levels. We start out trying to become people of Torah who are following the mitzvot, and therefore we are fortunate enough to receive the tzedakah, the tzedek of Hashem, meaning He's going to treat us with the all of the mode of beracha and all of the good things that come with being under the covenant of Bnei Yisrael with Hashem, because we're on the program of the Jewish people. And then if we go beyond that, if we're able to be one of the yechidim, one of the yechidei segula, one of the individuals who is able to ascend to an even higher level of knowledge of Hashem, then we also get an even higher level of special treatment, if you will, from Hashem. Okay?
So that means the Yodacha doesn't come without the You have to go in order.
You have to go in order. You can't skip the steps. You can't skip the steps. But what's interesting about it though is that you have to start out like any good program. You always start out with what's the objective, right? So the first thing that you know, whenever you're interested in any process, the first thing you want to know about a process is what is the conclusion, what's the consequence, what do I get at the end? Okay, so Rambam doesn't start out necessarily with the things that are the simplest. He starts out with the ultimate. He's going to speak about the ultimate. He's going to talk about nivu'ah. He's going to talk about prophecy and about all of these things that are the ultimate level that we can reach. And then he gets to, okay, how do I start working on my character in order to be a person who can really achieve that kind of understanding and that kind of relationship with Hashem. So first he's going to lay out for you the building blocks or the foundations of everything. Because you always have to work backwards. When you're dealing with any journey, you have to know where you're going first. Even if you're using a GPS, it can't take you anywhere without giving it the destination, right? So Rambam is going to first give you a destination that you'll reach, and then he'll start mapping out what are the steps that need to be taken to achieve it. And if you look, really the whole book of the Rambam, this is the entire Mishneh Torah in one volume without any commentaries. That's what it looks like. So it's really 14 books. If you go through, if we were doing an entire study of the Mishneh Torah, which maybe we'll decide to do instead of just this kind of a taste of it today. So if we were doing the entire thing, then the first thing we would do actually is go through his description of the 14 books and how they come together actually to present a vision or a roadmap for an ideal society, an ideal Jewish society that is leading people to the highest level of understanding Hashem in the most effective way, which is really how the Rambam envisions what the Torah and mitzvot are all about. And ultimately that is just one part of a mission of bringing all of humanity to knowledge of Hashem, which is what the Nevi'im talk about. First the Jewish people will reach their purpose, and then in reaching their purpose they're going to be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim, they're going to sanctify God's name in the world, and all the nations of the world are also going to see we don't have to go after people, killing them and attacking them to force them to believe in our religion, because it speaks for itself. Only people who are insecure have to do that. People who feel that they need to convert others, proselytize, or kill, maim, or anything like that. Those people are insecure in how persuasive their religion is, because they have to kill you or threaten you in order to get you to listen to it. But the Jewish people say, no, we just have to do it right. If we do it right, what did the parasha say yesterday? Kihi chokhmatchem uvinatchem la'enei ha'amim. Anybody's going to see it. They're going to say, this is wisdom and understanding. We want more. We want to understand it. We're not going to have to take a sword out and go after them. They're going to see it. So that's our belief. Once we start the process of ascending, step after step in Torah as a Jewish people, we're not going to have to explain it to anybody. They will see and they will appreciate it, they will admire it, and they will want to follow suit. It's a natural process.
I thought it would be the other way around. Chastecha le'enecha would be his kindness to the people who are understanding, but Hashem is usually more just. As the person ascends higher, he deals with more justice with the person, like with Moshe Rabbeinu, with Yaakov, with Abraham, so Yaakov. As they reach higher, we see a little bit more finer. He deals with them a little bit more strict,
right?
Se. So I would have thought like Chastecha would be Leishalev. His kindness would be to the people.
He gives it easy. Lets them have easier time.
Easier time as ascending, and then would be whether it's Tzidkatcha to the Neodecha, to the people who are more. I don't know. That's just how.
That's a really good question. I think the answer to that is that you're looking at it from the perspective of the means. In other words, Hashem might challenge the tzaddikim more or place more obstacles in their path in order to bring the best out of them. Okay? But ultimately that is chesed. And like we say that happy is the person asher tiyasserenu yah. If Hashem takes the time to go out of his way to give you a hard time, that means you must be pretty important. It's actually a chesed, because what's he doing? It's like if you have a coach, let's say a coach selects one guy who says that player, he's going to be a star. So you know what? I'm going to drill that player 10 times harder than the other players. The other players, it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter what they do, because they're not going to go anywhere. But that player, I'm going to give him a hard time. I'm going to demand from him, 110% because he is going to be a star. That's the way Hashem works. So yeah, it looks like he's treating them more harshly, he's making more demands, but actually it's a greater chesed, because what's he doing? Ultimately, he's giving them their own personal tutorial because he wants to bring out the best in them. The rest of us, he just leaves us hanging because we're not worthy of that kind of personal attention, so to speak, right? It's like they have that famous story about, the doctor sees two patients, right? The first patient that comes in, and the doctor tells the patient, you can eat whatever you want, don't worry, you can, you don't have to take any medicines, you don't have to exercise, and he lets the patient go. And then the second patient has seemingly the same, ailment, and he says, you have a very strict regimen of what you're allowed to eat. You can't eat this, you can't eat this, you can't eat this. And you have to exercise every day, and you have to do that. He gives him a whole thing. And he says, wait a second, the guy out there that just left, you told him he could do whatever he wanted, and he gets to eat, whatever foods he wants, and he doesn't have to work hard, and me, you're giving me, a very strict diet. I can't eat anything, and I have to work very hard. I have to exercise every day. Why the disparity? And so the doctor said, that guy has terminal illness. There's no hope for that guy. You have the ability, you have the potential that you might be able to recover, and because I know you can recover and you can recuperate, that's why I'm giving you a hard time. Because I want you to, for him, let him enjoy the rest of his life. He's not going to make it. Okay, so in the same way, for the person who's not on such a high level, Hashem doesn't want to give you a hard time, because what's the point? You're not ready to achieve those heights yet. But for the person who's ready, you want to push them and get them to. It's like if you give singing lessons to a tone-deaf person, you're wasting your time, right? Getting them private singing lessons is not a good investment of your money. But as somebody who has potential, you see that they really have musical talent and they have a good voice, and you get that's a good investment. That's the way. That's why. So even though you're going to demand of them more practice and more, you're going to require more of an effort on their part. It's really chesed. It's really chesed. So now we can see what is in Sefer HaMadda. So what's in Sefer HaMadda are Hilchotav Chamesh. There are 5 topics. V'zeh hu siduran. This is right under where it says the name of the book. Hilkhot Yesodei HaTorah. Number 1 is the laws, what he calls the Hilkhot Yesodei HaTorah, the foundations of the Torah, which we're going to look at the beginning today. Hilkhot Deot is the laws of character traits. Okay? And then Hilkhot Talmud Torah, laws of Talmud Torah. So somebody could argue, well, Talmud Torah should come before character traits, but we'll see in a second. Hilkhot Avodah Zarah, the Chukot HaGoyim, the laws of idolatry, which is of course the negation of the opposite direction of Talmud Torah. It's what you're supposed to stay away from. Hilkhot Teshuvah, and the laws of Teshuvah, returning. So
it goes in opposite order of Lishlei Lev and Yodecha, no?
Yeah, it does.
I think like Lishlei, first do Teshuvah, then you learn what you're not supposed to do. And
right.
Eventually you get to Deot, which is Yediat Hashem and Yesodei HaTorah. Right,
so Hilchot Talmud Torah kind of embraces the 2 things above it, because in order to have good character, one of the things that we'll learn if we continue with our Rambam, we get to Hilchot Deot. One of the things you learn is you can't really do Hilchot Deot without Talmud Torah, because the fundamental principle of good character is knowing what the right thing is to do. Not the way that our Rambam understands character development is being a person who makes rational choices. Not having, let's say, being always very passionate, or always very calm, or always very angry, or always very passive, or always any kind of... Not having a knee-jerk reaction, not having a habit that determines how you respond to situations, but actually looking at the situations and acting wisely. That's what he considers Hilchot Deot. That's why he talks about the middle path. That's what the middle path is. The famous middle path. It doesn't mean 50% of the time you should be happy, 50% of the time you should be sad, 50% of the time you should be angry, 50% of the time you should be calm. That's not what middle means, even though it doesn't mean average. What it means is being in the middle, which means you don't have a response. There's certain people that if anything, they're always upset. Okay, they're always flying. It could be that you spent 50 cents, they're very angry. You spent $50,000, they're also very angry. It doesn't matter. Then certain people, nothing phases them. Nothing phases them. They're very apathetic. That is a biological, genetic That's either the product of your genetics or your upbringing, your environment. That's not really coming from your mind or your thinking. You're not consciously making a decision to be like that. That's just your personality. Certain people are naturally very giving. And they just give and give and give of themselves even when it's not the wise thing to do, even when it might be a mistake. Other people are very stingy, even when it doesn't make any sense. It's very little money for let's say a comfort or a benefit that's worth it, but they don't want to part with their money, even $1. So you have that's not two extremes that are hardwired into a person. So Hilkhot Deot is about not naturally drifting to either extreme, but having the middle path. The middle path means, let me look at the situation and see, is it warranted to be angry? Is it warranted to be happy? Is it warranted to be sad? Is it warranted? That doesn't mean that you should be any of these automatically. Okay, like a person who's always morose. They're not looking at the situation. It's coming from within them. They're not really engaging with the outside world. So, but in order to know when it is appropriate to have these different reactions, you need Talmud Torah. You're going to need to have knowledge to do that. That just clears the way to have an intelligent response, but that doesn't necessarily mean you know what an intelligent response is. So that's why you need Hilkhot Talmud Torah to be able to tell you that. And of course, Yesodei HaTorah is even more advanced in terms of understanding these esoteric subjects, as we'll see. Hilkhot Avodah Zarah is kind of the opposite of Yesodei HaTorah, somebody who replaces the fundamentals of Torah, the priorities and the values and the ideals of Torah with some foreign way of looking at the world, such as they believe that created things are divine. That's the ultimate error, is to think that anything in the created world is the ultimate reality, whether it be like in the grossest form, worshipping an idol, or in the more general form, thinking that nature is God, thinking that nature is all that there is, and worshipping nature. So there's many different levels of deifying created things. And then Hilkhot Teshuvah is returning from that. In other words, we all have within us certain distortions. We're all constantly in a process of refining who we are, both in terms of our actions, in terms of our thoughts, and even in terms of our character traits, of course. And so Teshuvah is the constant process of coming closer to the ideals that are at the beginning of this list. Hilkhot Yesodei HaTorah, the foundations. Hilkhot Deot, the character. All these things we have to constantly work on ourselves to uproot the Avodah Zarah that sneaks in. Because there are always alien influences that are infiltrating our behavior and our thought. And so we have to guard ourselves from those kinds of things. And as superstitions, for example, the Rambam would say superstition sneaks in. That's replacing the idea that Hashem is the one and only that runs the world. Hashem is the one and only that runs the world, but also I need to do this superstition just to be sure. Why? If Hashem is the only one that runs the world, why do you need that?
Just in case.
Just in case. Right. Just in case what? Just in case what? Just in case Hashem doesn't really run the world then. That's what it is. Just in case Hashem isn't really just and fair. That's what the person's saying, right? That's not, that's Avodah Zarah. That's why the Rambam connects that to Avodah Zarah, because you're already ascribing power to forces other than Hashem. If you really believe in Hashem, do you need to do superstition? Of course not. If I follow what Hashem says, He is the master of the universe, He is just and fair and gracious and all those things. What is any other magic or superstition going to benefit me if I recognize that Hashem is the only one managing the world? It's only if I think there are other forces out there that I need to be afraid of that all of a sudden I need to cover my bases with different kinds of superstition.
Red bracelet.
What? Red bracelet, green bracelet, blue, whatever. It doesn't matter.
So then why does the Gemara talk about Ayin Hara?
Ayin Hara is something else. I mean, Ayin Hara... Ayin Hara, if you look at the sources on Ayin Hara, most of them, if not all, are really reducible to a human phenomenon. They're really a human phenomenon, because if you look in Pirkei Avot, it talks about Ayin Tov, having an Ayin Tov and an Ayin Hara, right? When they talk about Lev Tov, right? It talks about what makes a person good, right? So Ayin Hara is the negative characteristic of a person, actually. What is Ayin Hara? Ayin Hara means that people resent success. And if you flaunt it, why do you bring Ayin Hara upon yourself if you say, I have a lot of children, or I have a lot of money, or I have a nice car, whatever? The reason is because people don't like them. That's the real reason. Ayin Hara means they might not even be conscious of that they don't like it. but it sows the seeds of resentment in other people. When they see a person a flashy person, they feel within themselves ayin hara. Ayin hara means that they resent you, and that with or without realizing it, they've got negative emotion towards you that may come out in ways that can harm you. That's why it says certain people could be immune to ayin hara. If you're very modest, first of all, if you're very modest about what you do have, you protect yourself from ayin hara. Because other people don't. If you go on Facebook and you post, your brand new Porsche or whatever, and everyone sees it, then that's bringing ayin hara. Why is it bringing ayin hara? Not because there's a magical force ayin hara that's going to come get you now, but because people are going to see it and they're going to say, "Oh, they're doing so much better than me. I hate that guy." They might not say that, but they're going to be feeling it, right? In their heart, they're going to be feeling it, right? And in the same way, with children, some people maybe are struggling to have children, or they weren't able to have as many as they wanted, or their children have problems, or they, or they're having, God forbid, health issues or whatever, and you have healthy children, and then people feel negatively towards you because of that. That's why it says certain people didn't have ayin hara. Because there's certain people who were in a position that they're not subject to ayin hara. Who's not subject to ayin hara? Like it talked about Yosef not being subject to ayin hara, or Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, his family not subject to ayin hara. Why? Because a person who's in a position that nobody bothers being jealous of them. They're just out of their league. They're out of their league. They don't. You don't look at the royal family in England and say, "Wow, I really resent them." They're not in your framework. There's no ayin hara because you don't. Nobody expects that they're going to measure up to the Queen of England. I mean, it's just not. It's not in your framework. But when a person is in your framework and you say, "Why am I not the one who has that? Why does that person have it?" So it's better to downplay what you have. That's what Yaakov Avinu does when he comes to see Esav. "Oh, I have a little bit. I don't have much. I really wasn't successful. I wasn't. I just have shor v'chamor. I have one ox. I have one donkey. I'm not a big deal," because he makes it seem insignificant. He doesn't flaunt what he has, and by not flaunting, he doesn't bring upon himself that ayin hara. The ayin hara is really essentially a psychological thing that is a real thing. I'm not saying it's not a real thing. It's a real and dangerous thing. Because it can harm you. It can harm you not through magic. It can harm you because when people feel that way towards you, right? You'll cause them. If you cause them to dislike you and resent you, then that whether or not they realize it consciously or unconsciously, it can have an effect on the way that they interact with you and the way that people perceive you and feel towards you. Think about it when you see a person. An example of like a person who does bring ayin hara on themselves is like Donald Trump. I always think of him, because he's always like, he sues somebody for suggesting his net worth is not as high as it is, things like that. He's like, he's so arrogant, and so he has ayin hara, like tons of ayin hara. So if you had a chance to like help Donald Trump out of a really tough bind, would you do it? You wouldn't be inclined to do it, because why would I want to help that jerk? He's not a nice person, even though his daughter isn't Jewish. She converted or whatever. But I'm not going to help that guy. He's not a nice guy. So there's a feeling that people will be less inclined. They'll say, he doesn't need my help. He's already doing fine. I don't want to bother. So people will have less of an inclination towards pro-social behaviors towards you if you're flaunting what you have and they feel resentment. They might not even realize why, but they're not going to go out of their way. Whereas if you're a person who's modest and you're a person that people, therefore you're more likable and people feel more of a positive, inclination towards you, then when you're in need or when you're in trouble, they'll be likely to help you, and they'll be more concerned about any harm coming to you. So it makes you much more. It puts you in a much better position vis-a-vis other people. But the idea that there's some kind of ayin hara floating around in the world, that goes against the idea of Yichud Hashem. Either Hashem is one, and therefore the only thing we have to fear is Hashem, or we have to fear Hashem and also ayin hara, and also the saints, and also we could throw in the devil, and also something else. So we start fearing too many different things.
I was taught that ayin hara was more like invoking, like if somebody sees it, not that his resentment towards you, but his resentment towards causes like God to relook and say, does this guy really deserve what I'm giving him?
Oh, that's also true. That's also true. Right. So if a person is, but again, it's coming from Hashem.
Right. So then if I really deserve it, what's the difference if I flaunt it? I got it. God gave it to me because He wanted me to have it. So let everybody look at it.
Well, it's like for example, if a person, it also depends how you flaunt it. So I'll tell you an example of somebody who did the wrong thing, like Chizkiyahu HaMelech is an example. Chizkiyahu HaMelech had a very bad disease. He almost died, and then he survived. And then when the Babylonians, they sent a delegation over to visit him after he was recuperating, and what did he do? He showed them all of his money, all of his treasure, all of his palace, and so Hashem said, you know what? I'm glad you showed them all that because they're going to take it, right? Now, why was it that that happened? Because he should have talked about Hashem. In other words, it's all about how you present it. If a person comes and says, everything I have is like a gift of Hashem, I don't deserve it, I'm not worthy, Hashem gave it to me, and I feel humbled by it. It's all about how a person presents themselves and how a person relates to what they have. If a person relates to what they have in an arrogant way, and they feel entitled to it, and they show it off in order to make other people feel inferior, then that's going to cause others to resent them, and it's also going to cause Hashem to say, wait a second, I'm investing in a bad project over here, because this guy is just being reinforced in his arrogance and his haughtiness, and that wasn't my intention, so maybe I got to redirect these funds somewhere else. But if the person really recognizes it as a gift of Hashem, people who give an enormous amount of tzedakah, for example, they're really philanthropists. I know at least a couple of people who had to go and specifically ask their rabbis for a heter to give more than half their assets to tzedakah, because they had so much that they said, I have too much. I want to give more. So that person, it's very unlikely that you're going to have resentment towards that person, because look what they're doing. They realize everything they have comes from God, and they're giving it right back to the system. They're giving it right back. So Hashem is going to see that and say, people are going to see that and say, wow, that's a wonderful person. And the person himself is humbled by what he has instead of arrogant. So of course Hashem is going to, is going to treat him accordingly. But if a person brings upon himself ayin hara because he's showing off, of course that's going to cause Hashem to reevaluate whether he's making a good investment. The other thing that they say is, if a person is moser dino l'shamayim, he says, Hashem, go punish that person over there. They're a very bad person. Then Hashem says, well, before I do that, let me check your, how you're doing. There's a lot of times that when we put ourselves on a pedestal, where we're inviting Hashem to evaluate whether we really deserve the pedestal or not, and that's a very very precarious position to place oneself in. So that's the Rambam's how Rambam would explain the framework here. Let's at least look at the first chapter and see Hilkhot Yesodei HaTorah here. He says, Yesh bechlalan, you can get a lot just from the first page. Yesh bechlalan eser mitzvot. So there are 10 commandments. That's not the 10 commandments we read yesterday. Those are Aseret HaDibrot. There's actually at least 14 commandments in there. But these are 10 mitzvot. The Rambam has in the beginning of Mishneh Torah a list of all 613 mitzvot. He lists them out, and then he takes all the 613 and he categorizes them in their, so to speak, proper place within the general system of the Torah. That's what the 14 books of the Mishneh Torah are about.
So he uses all of it within the...
He wrote a book called Sefer HaMitzvot, which teaches you the principles by which you can identify what is a mitzvah, what is considered a mitzvah. Let's say, for example, I tell you, it's a mitzvah to put on tefillin on your arm. The tefillin on your arm has to have a certain knot, and it has to have 4 parashiot inside, and the 4 parashiot in the tefillin, the one on the hand, the arm one, have to all be written on one parchment, and it has to be black. Now, are those all different mitzvot? It's one mitzvah that it has to be on your left arm, and it's one mitzvah that it has to be black, and it's one mitzvah that it has to have a knot of a certain type. It's one mitzvah that has to be. Then there's going to be in tefillin shel yad, there's already 16 mitzvot that you have out of the 613. You're not going to have many left if you do it that way. Hilkhot Shabbat. There's 39 melachot. Okay, there's already 39 mitzvot, and then you're going to have kiddush, and then if everything is a mitzvah, it's going to be thousands and thousands of mitzvot. So Rambam said you have to know the difference between what is a mitzvah and what is a din. What is part of a mitzvah? In other words, you have a law, you have a commandment, and then you have the details of that mitzvah. How to implement the mitzvah, how to observe it. You could have thousands of details, but you're really just fulfilling one mitzvah. You might observe 1,000 laws on Shabbat. So let's say I'm just maybe, giving that number as a random number, but 1,000 laws that you observe on Shabbat, but you're really just doing one mitzvah, which is being Shomer Shabbat. That's one mitzvah. Okay? Kiddush, let's say making Kiddush on Shabbat, there may be 20 halachot about how to make Kiddush on Shabbat, but you're really just doing one mitzvah. Making Kiddush on Shabbat is one mitzvah. So Rambam shows you how to enumerate the mitzvot, and one of the reasons he did that was because he wanted to make sure that he had the explanation of every mitzvah included in the Mishneh Torah, so it's totally comprehensive. Then what he does is he has his 14 books, each of which has its own theme, and he takes those mitzvot and he plugs them in to the books. And that he actually does in the introduction as well. That's why the introduction is so useful. First he lists the mitzvot, then he shows you the breakdown of how each mitzvah fits into a particular book. So I'll just show you, I'll hold it up for you. You can see Sefer HaMadda. First he has the 14 books. First he has all the mitzvot. Then he has the 14 books. And each one, he tells you which mitzvot fit into a given book. And then he goes about explaining each mitzvah. It's just so systematic, it's beyond comprehension. It's exactly 1,000 chapters. And it covers all 613 mitzvot plus all the rabbinic mitzvot. And they're all integrated. It's not just information coming at you. It's all organized as a textbook. So, something that today is like what we consider, you would need a computer program to put this together. It was in his mind. He sat down and wrote. He says he sat down and wrote it. He just sat down and wrote this, and then it took him 10 years to edit it and correct it and things like that. But this was how he had the Torah on his mind, organized like that. That's how a person should have. Now, what are the 10 mitzvot in Sefer HaMadda? In Hilkhot Yesodei HaTorah, rather. Shesh mitzvot aseh, v'arba mitzvot lo taseh. So there are 6 mitzvot, positive commandments, which means in the rest of the book we're going to have to cover the other 242. Okay, so you can keep a count as you go through. Right, 6 positive mitzvot and 4 negative mitzvot. V'zeu paratan. These are the details. Le'da sheyesh sham Eloah. The first one is to know that there is a God. That there is a God. Bet is shelo yaleh b'machashava sheyesh sham Eloah zulati Hashem. That you shouldn't entertain the possibility. It shouldn't come up in your mind that there's another God besides Hashem, which would include the devil, which would include Ayin Hara, any force that you think might be running the world alongside Hashem or in opposition to Hashem would be included in this.
How do you get to the idea of one God without contemplating the idea of not more than one God? That's what he's saying you should do, right?
Right. He means entertaining it as an actual position. He doesn't mean as a theoret. Right. He doesn't mean as a theoretical possibility to exclude it. He means to consider it as a genuine possibility that there's another God. When we approach it, we assume, okay, we know there's only one God. We might want to find an argument to demonstrate that that's true, but we don't really think to ourselves, oh, maybe there is really like Zoroastrianism or something like that. Which is, by the way, in the tefillah that we say every day, we're about to say, Yotzer or vorech choshech, right? He creates light, and he made darkness. That's from Yeshayahu. But in Arvit also, Asher b'dvaro ma'ariv aravim b'chokhmah, poteach she'arim b'tvuna. He brings the night, and poteach she'arim is talking about the morning, opening gates, meaning he opens the gates of heaven in the morning. We always mention midat hayom balayla, which means we always mention the daytime at night, and we always mention midat halayla bayom. We always mention the nighttime and the daytime. Why? So the reason, that's what it says in the Talmud, but the reason is because they were living amongst Zoroastrianism, the Zoroastrian religion, where they have, the God of light and the God of darkness, have the God of day, the God of night. So the Jews wanted to demonstrate, no, we don't believe in that. He's Yotzer Or Uvorech Choshech. There's not, just if we only said Yotzer Or in the morning, it makes sense because we're focusing on the daytime. It's Shacharit. But if we did that, it would lend credence to the people who believe that, you believe in the God of light, and at night you're praying to the God of darkness. No, it's the same. So, Liyachado, to say that God is one, is the third. Le'ahavot, to love God. Liyir'a mimenu, to fear God. And the Rambam is going to explain what all these mitzvot are. So the first is to establish that He exists. To reject the possibility that any other God exists. And then to believe in His unity, as we're going to see what that means. To love Hashem, to fear Hashem, l'kadesh shemo, to sanctify Hashem's name. All these things are going to come together. Shelo lechalel et shemo, to not, God forbid, desecrate God's name.
So the first 6 are the positive, and now he's doing the negative.
He goes back and forth. Because he said to know Hashem exists, and then don't think another God exists, right? Then he gives you a bunch of positive, and then he tells you a negative. Right? Shelo lechalel. Shelo le'abed dvarim shenikra shemo alehen. Just like we want to promote the belief in Hashem and the oneness of Hashem, we want to not destroy things that represent that Hashem's name is called on them. Meaning, not just not erasing Hashem's name, which obviously obviously you're not allowed to do. That's a negative thing. But you're not allowed to, let's say, take even a Sefer, even a Megillat Esther, okay, that doesn't have Hashem's name, you're not allowed to destroy it. Anything shenikra shemo alav, anything that Hashem's name is called on, meaning anything that's a vehicle of coming to knowledge of Hashem. That would include removing a stone from the Beit HaMikdash. Any harm, any damage inflicted on the Mizbeach, and the altar. Anything that is considered representative of or vehicle of the name of Hashem, you would not be able to dismantle or destroy it in any way. Lishmoa min ha-navi midaber bishmo, to listen to the prophet who is speaking in the name of Hashem, and shelo lenasoto, and not to test Hashem. Okay, we're going to see what these things are. All of these ultimately in Yesodei HaTorah are coming from the principle, the fundamental of fundamentals, which is Hashem's oneness, and all of these elements are to promote the knowledge and awareness of Hashem's